Hi class, I just realized that the demo I recorded today did not record audio. And since a lot of you were absent, I figured I would just re-record the demo briefly to cover what we talked today. So firstly, homework for next week, which I believe is the 12th, yes, April 12th, is to have items 1 through 5 done on project 4, as well as having your CAD files started. So of course you need all of your guts. This demo is going to show you how to kind of work with those product guts, how to set up your files. At the very least, I want your SolidWorks part file set up to have those guts in there as kind of like a CAD underlay, and to work with those files then to build your concepts. Reminder that you essentially need 4 concepts, 3 initial and then 1 refined. So again, 4 total, but the final one can be kind of an evolution of one of the 3. And again, if you set up your master sketch in a clever way, you can start to like push and pull to get 3 different concepts from one file. I'm okay with that. Okay, so how to set up your file with guts. Starting with my bike light here as my example, if I turn this to be transparent, you can see that in the inside I have some LEDs for the lights. I have a USB-C port that I downloaded from GrabCAD, and then I have an 18350 LiPo back here. Now, if we go off of the way to work with this and what we've talked about in the past, it would simply be to start working on your file with this light here. So let's say, let me roll back my tree. This is not the best tree for an example. This was kind of a really rough build for a different project that I'm reusing for this class as a demo. So let's say I get it to here, right? It's basically the rough bodies have been laid out. I would encourage that at this stage, if you got this far, to then create an assembly and start to drop the guts in there that you have downloaded. The sooner that you get to this stage, the better, because you want to check your guts that you've downloaded to make sure they fit your part file. So again, in this instance, let's say I would be inserting these batteries and such. So again, let's imagine that I've just put this battery in here. It's giving me errors because it doesn't like that the file has been rolled back. So let's just say I suppress this mates. And now I've dropped my battery in here. Now is when I would want to try and align it. So again, this is all of the stuff we've covered before on how to set up a mate. In this instance, I selected both of these, hit the paperclip to tell them to mate, and then the default is concentric. SolidWorks kind of makes an educated guess as to what you want to do. I think that looks great. So now we have my battery centered in there. Now, hypothetically, I've already adjusted this file so it matches. But let's say that, I was following my sketch, and maybe my sketch was a little bit optimistic. I wanted my light to look a little bit slimmer aesthetically. Well, now when I'm in my assembly, I realize by getting those guts in there that it needs to be longer. And again, just like we talked about in the past, you can always right-click on your part file, go to Edit Part, and now you're working on your part within the assembly. You can see your guts in there. So for example, I can take this extrude command, edit it within the assembly, and then click on that till it's long enough to encapsulate the light back there, or sorry, the battery back there. Of course, if you're in this workflow, just please be sure that you are working within the part within the assembly. You don't want to be adding features into the assembly. And again, you'll know that you're working within the part if the tree is blue and if you have this icon in the top right. If you click this and exit out of it, now I'm in the assembly. For example, if I were to now add like a fillet on this back edge, because I'm in the assembly, you'll notice that it puts it down here. So just double check that you don't have mates at the bottom of your tree and you don't have features down here, because I will take off points for that. So that is one way to work with the internal guts of your object. And again, if you start to build your model, the sooner you check the guts, the better. That's the main takeaway. I will now tell you guys a different way to work on this. So here's an example of a drill that I built a while ago for a different project. You can also download the file if you go to Box and go to Reference CAD. It is this rough drill ref SolidWorks part you can download. If I roll this back here to the top, you can see that I already have some components in here of a drill. And this is a part file. You can see at the bottom there's no mates or anything. You can also see this part file icon. And what this tells me, this says that these parts, these are bodies and surfaces that have been imported into the part. And you can see that they're properly aligned with the front plane so that they're centered. And I'm going to show you guys how to set this up. Again, you can think of this the way you might set up an underlay for a sketch. This is how you might set up an underlay for working in CAD. And again, a reminder that you need 3 different concepts. So it would make sense to set up a CAD underlay that you could then build 3 different concepts off of. So you build one concept, then you come back to your template with the guts in there and start a new one. What's useful with these guts is now, as I start my master sketches, which let me make these visible, and hide this reference sketch. You can see now I can start to plan for where these guts are. Obviously the trigger's in the wrong place, but like I can plan to make sure that my body, for example, is big enough to hide this motor and capture it. So the way that you might set that up would probably be as follows, okay? So you may start a new file just like we did with the bottle project, where you might have your sketch imported into the file here. And then you might start, this is a very rough master, but you might start a master sketch with that. At that stage, what I would do is I would make an assembly. So I'd go File, New, Assembly, and insert your beginning part file. Now you might want to insert the CAD guts. So again, existing part assembly, and now drill internals. Now, of course, all these internals are already here. They're all already arranged to each other just because I'm using this old file as reference. When you bring your files in one at a time, they won't be arranged so nicely. So what I would do then is imagine this is just one part. So I guess let's pretend that we're just looking at the motor. Oops. What you would want to do then is set up your motor so that it's located roughly where you think it should go, which is kind of in the back here. The other thing that's important, though, is that you get the guts, this motor file, to be centered on your objects. So in this instance, I'm going to take my motor front view and make sure that it is mated to the front view of my sketch. And depending on the part files from GrabCAD, if it's like from a different CAD program, sometimes you'll find that it's not built on the origin. So you may sometimes need to find the center here by finding the center line and mating that center point to to a plane, for example. And that's really important because, again, you want to always be building on the origin. You want these part files the gut files to be aligned correctly. So again, in this instance, I'm going to double check that the top plane is also mated. And again, my life's a little bit easier because this has already been centered for me on the planes in this original file. You may have to do that manually yourself. You can now set this up so that it's kind of close. And again, you would then repeat this process for each of these other things. So, for the trigger, for the chuck, and so on. And obviously I have this in the wrong place. But now once you have this set up, you could move forward in one of 2 ways. You could take your master sketch here and again say edit part. It wants me to save. And work like we did with the light here, where you edit the part and you know, make these adjustments with the gut file in there. But of course, there is always the mistake, as I pointed out with that fillet, that you can accidentally add a feature into the assembly. So that's one method. That's basically the fastest way to get the guts in there is once you have your kind of hand sketch imported in as a reference and maybe a rough master, pair the guts up to make sure everything aligns. But another way to work, which is how I set up this original drill file, is actually to save out the assembly as a part. So the way you do that is you go File, Save As, and you'll notice here one of the options is Part. And I can say Drill Demo. And what you'll notice is that if you do this, it's going to have all of these bodies imported. And I'll show you with the bike light as well. Let's open this up. So here, Drill Demo. You'll notice, however, though, that so maybe don't take the time to set up your master sketch in retrospect. This will just give you a raw part file with just these bodies kind of imported as kind of what I call dumb parts. They no longer have a tree reference to them or anything like that. And so now you would have to re-import your reference sketch. So actually in retrospect, if I go back to this drill sketch, better to start this process when you haven't invested too much time into your sketch. Really, it should just be the hand sketch because as you can see, it'll disappear. So you're going to have to bring that back in. So if I give you another example with my bike light here, let's imagine that I have just my sketch. It doesn't like that doesn't have mates. So let's say these are my components now. And again, you can see I took the time. They're centered on my right plane. I have the front plane kind of just behind the lights. The top plane is also centered on them. Clearly, this is an assembly with different parts. And you can see like each of these kind of have a build tree to them. But if I now go File, Save As, and change this to Part, and again say bike light guts, or maybe I would say bike light template. Maybe let's say CAD template. Now if I open up this part file, you can see that it's imported all of these bodies, right? Again, as sort of what I would call dumb bodies. To use the keyshot analogy, or not the keyshot analogy, sorry, the InDesign analogy, right? So like an assembly is like an InDesign file that's pointing to different links. By saving it out as a part, you're kind of embedding those links into the file. It's just, it prevents files getting lost. It's just a kind of a file organization strategy. Mainly good for design, for industrial design. Of course, engineers would not be happy with this because they would be, it makes moving the parts harder and stuff. But I find this as a useful workflow to just then build around the parts. They're in there. I don't need to worry about them. Often I'll drop them into a folder, which I can do by holding Shift, clicking on all of those, and then just saying Add to New Folder, whatever you want to call it. And now I'm ready to start. And you can see here all the planes aligned because I took the time to set that up properly in the assembly. And now I can go ahead here and start on my right plane. I can start putting together this master sketch. And making sure that all those guts are then covered as I design my part. So once again, those are two methods. You can work within the assembly, or you can export an assembly with guts as a part file to use as kind of an underlay, the same way that you would use an underlay for a sketch. Again, or the analogy of like embedding links into a file so you don't have to worry about part organization or strategy. So again, for next week, I would like everyone to at least be at this stage. If you don't like working, embedding the links into this part file, you can work with an assembly. So please just at least have your guts arranged properly, ideally to an orthographic hand sketch. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. And again, we can talk about this, cover this briefly next week if there's any further questions. Thanks.